So these things do happen. My father-in-law is average in just about everything in life, but when even at 94, when it comes to business finances, he's a genius. Go figure. Life and that development in that 9 months, and I'm convinced that when you come out at the end of that 9 months, 95 to 98% of who you're going to be is done. No doubt in my mind, it's done. Personality, abilities, traits, because however you come out, that's how you're going to affect others. It's just a burner.
Yeah.
And however you affect others, and that affects how they deal with you. I don't know. Anybody else? This is not from our course in any way. Disagree?
Yes.
I disagree.
Huh?
I disagree.
You disagree. So you think that environment has a lot more to do with it?
No, I think there's a good portion of each. I think it's quite a balance. I think we have, because of how environment is focusing and there's the baby is so open and receptive for a first at least year to 2 years, that can overwhelm or alter what initially was programmed.
Yeah.
But I think there's quite a definite balance. In my children, I see a lot of inherent stuff that there's no way you taught them, that it was passed on for many generations. I also see a lot of our influences, both good and bad, as well as influences of everyone else.
Yeah.
There's a balance.
And I just want to echo those thoughts that a lot of times people want to use genetics to explain. Many times you hear it in criminal behavior, but I think what's missed many times is the context of the environment, which is another way of saying exactly what she said. So you have to go to extreme examples to really see that from a scientific point of view, but if you do, you see it all the time.
Do I ask how you got here from death and dying?
Just threw it in. We're talking about the philosophy of life. I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'll go. About my grandson. My grandson definitely has some speech. He's getting there. He's really doing well, but he was dropping his initial consonants. We weren't sure how much he was picking up from school in terms of learning. And it was hard to understand him because he didn't say the initial consonants. Last time we visited with them, my wife sat down next to, my wife was sitting in the seat, and then he wanted to sit next to her, but his sister was kind of next to my wife. Remember, you can't understand a lot of what he says, and you don't know what he picks up in school. He looks at my wife, his grandmother, and says, "Move your ass." We got our ass.
All right.
I've seen you guys there before.
So, like I said, Rabbi taught you exactly what happens when we die. Now you know the answer to the afterlife, so I don't have to tell you that. What we're going to talk about now, first of all, last week, I was supposed to do kind of that random combination of fast days and home ritual, and I totally forgot about fast days. I had my notes up here, and I got so into the laws of kashrut, of keeping kosher, that I completely forgot.
So why not back to your head?
Yeah, it was that massive amount of wine that we had. So for those of you who weren't here last week, you missed out on the party. I'm not going to do it tonight. So what I'm going to do next week, I actually have you guys for the full time. And next week we're going to do all of the holidays that we haven't covered yet. And I'm going to put the fast days into that. So next week we're doing Hanukkah, Tu B'Shvat, Purim, which are all non-Torah holidays. I'm not going to say non-biblical, but they're non-Torah holidays. Then we're going to do Passover and Shavuot, which are the two remaining pilgrimage festivals, right? What was the third? have done? Sukkot, good. So Sukkot, Passover, and Shavuot make up the 3 pilgrimage festivals. So we'll do Passover and Shavuot. And Passover to Shavuot is a whole period of time called the Omer, and we'll talk about that. Within that time, you also have the bulk of Israel's civil calendar. Israel's Independence Day, Holocaust Remembrance Day, Memorial Day, that was not in order. So I'll talk about Israel's civil calendar, and we'll also do the fast days. So it's a lot, but we have the whole time, and I think it'll be fun. And then we only have 1 week after that, and we're going to do a model Passover Seder that last week. So next week when I talk about Passover, I'll talk about the history and the background, but very little about the practice, because we're going to do the practice the week after. Okay? So what I've done is just put together a little sheet for you on mourning and the mourning process. Maimonides, who we've talked a little bit about, I think, right? 12th, 13th century. One of his goals was really making the teaching of Judaism something more simple, right? He had a list of the mitzvot, a list of all the commandments that were taken from the different places of the Torah. And one, he tells us, is the Torah commands us to mourn when our relatives die. Okay? Now, nowhere does it say in the Torah, thou shalt mourn when your relatives die. But what we see is examples of people mourning when their loved ones die. So all of the laws, all of the traditions of mourning are going to be derived from what we see people do. Does that make sense? And also what we don't do. So I heard, did I hear someone ask about tattoos? Okay. So I'm going to give you a slightly different answer for tattoos than what Rabbi Bernholtz gave you. And it's not about the cemetery. He said, I heard him say yes, right? But as far as why tattoos are prohibited, in the book of Leviticus, we see, you shall not make gashes in your flesh for the dead, or incise any marks on yourselves. I am the Lord. That's our prohibition against tattoos. Okay?
That is in reference to a remembrance of someone that's
Right.
passed away.
Right. So, but then it says, or incise any marks on yourselves.
Well, the comma, I would infer,
Right.
is referring to
Right.
for
So,
the dead.
so my theory, okay, well, first of all, what we're told, and again, remember what I told you, if we're told not to do it, and it's specific, people probably were doing it, right? So my guess is that there was a tradition where when you would hear that someone had passed away, that a loved one had died, people would cut their skin, right? Or make some kind of marks on their skin. And we're told, as this new Jewish people, don't do that, right? So two things come of that. First, I'll talk about tattoos, even though other than that it's prohibited. When I teach tattoos, not necessarily to kids, but to older people who are going to be making decisions, what I say is we really do learn a lot from this, right? What it seems to me our tradition is telling us, and I think that this says something about how we mourn in general, not to make permanent decisions when we're not in a fully stable place, right? That's how I like to think of the prohibition of tattoos. That what these people would do is a way of mourning. They would punish themselves, right? And they would make these permanent marks in their skin. Now, I don't say a permanent solution to a temporary problem, right? Death is not a temporary problem. But our tradition acknowledges that our emotions and our feelings change as the living get further and further away from the death. It's not about moving on, it's not about forgetting, but it's understanding that we move forward, and the tradition that we're going to learn about helps us to move forward. So the prohibition about tattoos is saying don't do anything drastic when you're in a time of mourning, right? So the way that I would relate this to tattoos in general, for someone who asks me, you know, can I get a tattoo? I mean, it's not my question to answer, right? The question with regard to the cemetery is, this is a commandment in the Torah. Don't eat pork is a commandment in the Torah. So why would we keep someone from being buried in a Jewish cemetery who has a tattoo if we're not going to ban someone from a Jewish cemetery who eats pork, right? It's deciding whether or not to follow that commandment is just like deciding whether or not to follow any other commandment. The difference is it's a permanent mark. Do I think that someone can healthily make the decision to get a tattoo? Sure. But I think that a lot of people do make that particular decision in response to something that's happened, whether it's a death or not, but as a way of mourning something. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, is there a special consideration given to Holocaust survivors?
Yeah, but again, the cemetery thing is not an issue. Did Rabbi mention Holocaust with regard to cremation? One reason why cremation is even more negatively viewed today is because of the Holocaust, right? That even though, you know, perhaps you can figure out ways around it, that why would we do something by choice that we were, you know, that was forced upon us? And tattoos have gotten kind of the same, right? Obviously it's forbidden, right? But why would, you know, it's more of a reminder. All right, but that wasn't today's lesson. But anyway, and we'll see in a bit, I know a lot of you already know, but we'll see in a bit how we replace that cutting of the skin or that part. I can tell you. Now what we do is we tear the clothing, right? And what our tradition will tell us is that when you hear of the passing of a close relative, and we're going to talk about what a close relative is, that whatever clothes you're wearing, you tear the clothing that you're wearing at that time, and that will actually be the clothing that you wear all the way through the initial mourning process. In progressive Judaism, and I think in I don't know if it's in conservative for sure, I don't know if you'd see it in Orthodox, the replacing the tearing of the clothes with a black ribbon. And we'll put a ribbon on our clothes and tear that, so it's as if we were tearing our clothing, but that way we don't have to buy new clothes. All right, so we don't make gashes, we don't hurt ourselves or make permanent marks on ourselves as a way of mourning. Oh, and then here we go. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, this is when the brothers think that Joseph has died, right? He rents his clothes. So that's the tearing of the clothes, and we do see that elsewhere. And Jacob rents his clothes, put sackcloth on his loins, and observed mourning for his son many days. We don't know how many. We see what Job, these are just biblical examples of mourning, right? Job arose, tore his robe, cut off his hair, threw himself on the ground and worshipped. So he tore his clothes, shaved off his hair, not a permanent decision. He said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's a verse that you'll still hear, that you hear